Robert Englund here, a.k.a. Freddy Krueger, and you should be listening to Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast. Don't go out there. Don't answer the door. Don't go near Elm Street. Don't look out the window. That's what Wes Craven did. And you know who he saw? Freddy Krueger. Check out Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, it's Nico, Brian, Mike, and Dustin, and they are all that stand between you and the films that could end the world. Welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. Just want to thank everyone who's been listening. And really excited about the guest we have on tonight, and I'm just going to jump right into it. Robert Englund began his career starring in the 1973 period Southern film Buster and Billy, and worked through the 1970s in film and television. In 1984, he was cast as Willie in the miniseries and weekly TV show V, and landed the role of Freddy Krueger in Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. After more than 75 films, 4 TV series, and numerous episodic guest star roles, Englund is now directing as well as acting. The veteran character actor is exploring the world of reality TV and internet programming and loves doing edgy voiceovers for games and animation. You can find him now as the host of True Terror every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. on the Travel Channel. Mr. Englund, an immense thank you for joining us. Obviously, this is a huge pleasure for all of us here on the Don't Go Out There podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. You guys hanging in there?
Yes, sir.
In these perilous times?
Yeah, weird times, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Well, I guess I've got the honors of going first. No nerves, right?
All right.
So right now, you know, like Nico said, you can find you on the Travel Channel's newest series, True Terror, with Robert Englund. And you scour news reports of yesteryear to bring viewers twisted tales ripped straight from the headlines of newspapers past. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think what attracted me to it is, a lot of our stories have become local urban legends, and some of them have been disproved. We were more naive 100 years ago. We were less educated. Medicine, science wasn't as advanced. But what I like is that historical hindsight, that distance. It gives you kind of an insight into kind of like what we bought into, what we believed, how superstitious we might have been, or just how open we were in the American psyche to this dark stuff, that was put in newspapers. And I think that the fact that we've sourced everything from a newspaper, it gives it that kind of historical distance. And I don't want to say credibility, but it just helps us kind of understand where these stories and these legends came from. Now, some of them are out now true.
Right.
We did a Buried Alive one about the smallpox epidemic in New Orleans. Sound familiar? And we did one tonight. There's one tonight that's really strange, and I don't want to be a spoiler alert about it. But if you ever saw the old Hitchcock Psycho,
yes,
Anthony Perkins,
absolutely,
mother. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I will say no more, but. It's about a guy who preserves his precious love of his life.
Oh, boy.
And those are the true ones. But even given that, I love the idea that, like, for instance, I'm not a Bigfoot guy, but it's interesting to know that 100 years before they made the cheesy Bigfoot movies, a guy running around in a gorilla suit in The Legend of Boggy Creek or something on 16 millimeter film and sold it to the drive-in movies. Teddy Roosevelt, a president of the United States of America, on a hunting expedition in Montana, sourced to newspapers a Sasquatch sighting. So I did. That's the kind of stuff we're finding. I talked to another podcast earlier, and one of the guys there had just found a newspaper article like over 100 years old about the Amityville house. So that's like 100 years.
Wow.
What's the movie is like 1970s, right? So this is like 70 years before that. There was already something going on that piece of dirt. And I just love the fact that some of these urban legends really came from a source. It's a kind of an Americana. It's a kind of dark underbelly of America. It kind of shows us how we've always been kind of attracted to the dark side.
Absolutely. And if you could tell us real quick, how were you approached to do this new show? Like who approached you? How were you approached to do this new show? Did you approach them or?
One of the great happy accidents of my career, you guys, is having done a big miniseries that was a #1 hit in America, and then doing the first couple of Nightmares really close to each other. I became an international actor almost overnight. And this is nothing they teach you in school. You'd never know. You might have a little car show on the air from your hometown, and they're watching it in Paris or Germany now on a podcast, and you might be a bigger celebrity there than you are here. Well, I became an overnight international actor because of Freddy Krueger and because of my work on a television series called V for Visitors, a big hit miniseries and TV series back in 82, 83, 84. And it opened the door for me to work abroad, and to do movies all over the world. And so most people in Hollywood know that I do movies, in Europe and in Canada, Mexico, Latin America, Africa. And so I thought when the Travel Channel approached me, I thought, oh man, I'm going to Paris. I'm going to go to Rome. I'm going to be doing some great show about where to stay, what the coolest B&Bs in Rome and Paris and London and Hawaii and down on the Italian Riviera. But they actually wanted me because I bring a lot of baggage now whenever I'm just me, because most people know me as that horror guy, Robert Englund, the guy that does the horror movies. And because I've aged now, I'm getting older, my face is starting to look a little, I don't know, Vincent Price, Max von Sydow from The Exorcist, a little bit like Klaus Kinski. I have this certain gravitas to my persona. And they just thought that with my baggage and the way I look now, I would be the perfect host to take you back in time a little bit, take you back in time to discover some of the sources of some of these strange legends and myths and, these stories, this Americana that's kind of dark and nasty.
Absolutely. You mentioned Freddy Krueger, and we promise we're not going to go too much into it. You're probably Freddy'd out, but well, we are a horror podcast, and we'd be remiss not to bring it up at least slightly. But you've obviously done a ton of other films and TV shows besides Nightmare on Elm Street. How does it feel to know as an actor and director that your legacy is so kind of tightly interwoven with that character in that franchise?
Well, you got to make peace with it. I know that when I die, my obituary is going to go, Freddy Krueger is going to be the first thing in the obituary column.
Right.
And I'm fine with that. I've made peace with that. No one sets out to be a famous cop actor or a famous lawyer actor or a famous doctor actor.
Right.
But it happens to a lot of us as actors. It's something that happens. And I had done 10 years of playing best friends and buddies and sidekicks. I worked with Jan Michael Vincent, and I worked, when he was the biggest star in the 70s, and Burt Reynolds and Jeff Bridges when he was a young actor. And I worked with Sally Fields, Susan Sarandon before the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I worked with Susan. I even had a little semi-nude scene with her. And, Henry, I got to work with the great Henry Fonda and Hal Holbrook. Right. I worked with all these people in the 70s, but I was always playing the buddy, the best friend, the sidekick. Right. Now, back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, even into the early 60s, the best friend and the sidekick could be older guys. In the old westerns, it was always some old guy was the best friend of John Wayne or Jimmy
Right.
Stewart. They were all these guys, wonderful character actors like Ward Bond and Walter Brennan. But those parts started to change in the late 60s, early 70s, and you didn't have old buddies anymore.
Right.
It was you had young buddies or you had younger sidekicks. I think it started right around the time of Dirty Harry. They gave him like a younger sidekick. You always get the rookie now. The rookie's always assigned to you. The rookie cop or the rookie doctor or your buddy, or you got a younger kid that's tagging along doing errands for you. So I would not have transitioned into those. And I was getting older. But the happy accident was I got out of that makeup back in 2005, and my face had aged. And my hairline had gone up an inch, and I had gray in my beard, and I had creases in my face, and I looked like a little bit like the guy from The Exorcist. I look a little bit like Vincent Price and a little bit like Klaus Kinski. So I fit right into the old doctor and the old psychiatrist and the old priest and the old poacher, and I started getting all those parts, and it was a nice fit. So I just kept real loyal to the horror genre, and I still go overseas. I did a movie last year. I starred in a movie with a wonderful director last year in Madrid. I don't know if you saw. There was a real fun grindhouse cheap thrill movie last summer called Crawl.
Oh yeah,
a lot of fun, really fun. That was shot in Romania. And that's my buddy, Alexander Aja. Great director. He's done some really good horror movies. Alexander's a terrific director. He did Horns with Daniel Radcliffe.
Yep.
But he's just a great, great guy. And I got to go work for him. And that's because of Freddy. All of that. All of those movies. And I've done maybe 14 or 15 movies now in Europe. That whole part of my career is just because I stayed loyal to the genre, of horror movies. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so walk me through a little bit what a normal day was for a makeup process in the chair for Freddy.
Well, I'm always the first guy on the set and the last guy to leave.
Right.
Because it takes forever to do the makeup. They got to get it right. They got to touch me up all day. And then at night, once they get me in that crap, they're not going to let me out of it because they know that it takes so long to put it on. And then I go into overtime anyway. They're always paying me overtime because my day, I don't think even before I did Freddy, the one reason actors make so much money is because we work like 15, 16-hour days. There's no such thing as an 8-hour day. And so my day would start listening to heavy metal music from one of my makeup men. They all seem to like heavy metal. And then I would get to pick an early morning talk show, and we'd segue into that. And they put the pieces on. Originally, I think it was 14 pieces, maybe a little more. And then they got it down. I think they got it down to 11 or 10 pieces. But they have to put it together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
And they put it together on me, and then they have to seam it. And then they have to color the seams. The pieces are pre-colored, but then they get the airbrush out. They do the airbrushing, and they color the seams. And then they have to add to it, enhance it. And then they, if I'm wearing contacts for a sequence, they put the contacts in. I can't do it because I've got makeup on my hands, and I can't touch anything around my eyes because that's makeup. So that would get the contacts dirty. Then they got to put the teeth in, and then it goes all the way down onto my chest, and the neck part's the hardest part to do. They got to get it up under my ears, and all these different pieces. The ears are separate, the nose, the chin, the brows, and then they fit it together. So that's a long, grueling thing. And while it's drying, it's that colostomy bag glue, medical adhesive, and that's I've got that all over me. So that has to stop. That has to stop itching. But once that stops itching, the foam latex pieces are so porous and light they don't really bother me. Now, I pretend like they do. I pretend like it's hell underneath that, because that way they pamper me more,
That's it.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
take better care of me. But that's the rough part. Then I do a day's worth of work, and then they got to take it off. Now, we made mistakes throughout. We had to modify the makeup. I used to try to take the makeup off too fast, and my eyes would swell shut, or I'd get
Goodness.
welts on my skin. On Nightmare, on Freddy versus Jason, I did a lot of water stuff, and I did a lot of underwater stuff, and they were afraid I was going to leak like an old condom. So they double glued me. They double glued me, and we couldn't get that makeup off. And we scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and my skin was raw. And I still had another couple of days to work in the regular Freddy makeup before I had a break. But finally, I made it to the Friday, and I had a week off, and I just got in a seaplane and went up to some little hippie town in Vancouver and sat in the hot tub, and waited for my face to heal. But yeah, we made mistakes during the run. I remember once I walked through a flaming arbor. I think it might have been part 2, and it melted the ear and the side of the makeup to the side of my head. I didn't know that because it melted from the inside.
Wow.
I did 5 takes. My makeup man got his union card that day, so I let him go off and do a piece of acting so he could get his union card, because he had some dialogue. And I said, oh, hell, I can walk through the flaming arch. That's no big deal. Well, one time isn't bad. You do it 5 times, and it gets hot in there. And I've got the makeup on anyway. So we took them all night to get that crap out of my ear. The latex literally melted and ran down into my ear canal. We had to get down there and poke and scrape that out. That was no fun. But for the most part, it was pretty easy. I picked my nose once with a Freddy claw. And your face bleeds. You get in a fight, you bleed more if somebody hits you in the face, or if you're working in the yard and you get a thorn scratches your face, you bleed like a pig, because we have so many capillaries in our face.
Right.
And I get dust up my nose because they put KY jelly all over me so that my makeup catches the light. But the dust on the sound stage gets in my nose and gets around my eyes, so I'm always wiping my eyes and picking at my nose, because I can feel that dust in there accumulating from the dirty sound stage. And I went up there once to wipe some dust. It felt like I had a cobweb in my nose, and I must have cut through the latex with the tip of my Freddy glove. And about 14 hours later, they took the makeup off me, and that whole part of the mask, the nose up to underneath my eyes and out to my cheekbones, was filled with dried blood. I'd been breathing under there for hours. Yeah, that was pretty gross.
So obviously your long horror lineage, you had a couple of stints with arguably, well, not arguably to me, I mean, he was to me the greatest horror director of all time in Wes Craven. How was it working with him? I mean, how did you meet and your relationship develop over the years?
Well, I met Wes on just a traditional, typical audition. And back then we sort of thought of Wes as kind of a David Lynch guy. Right. I remember watching a loop in a New Wave bar. Remember the New Wave, skinny ties and big hair? And I was at some New Wave bar in the early 80s. There was a little punk rock girl working behind the bar that I had a crush on. And they had these monitors on either end of the bar, and they would run in one monitor. It was a continuous loop of scenes from Eraserhead by David Lynch. And in the other one, there were scenes from Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left by Wes Craven. But it was in black and white. It was like an old black and white copy, video copy. But I watched that. So we were I was at least in my mind's eye, kind of pairing Wes up as this sort of dark, Rasputin, David Lynch guy. I thought he probably wore all black, had long black hair, and looked like a wizard or something. And but I really thought of him as an artist, although a dark one. And I was curious to see what he was like. So I just went on a traditional interview. I liked the script, and Wes just sat there and gave me his vision of how the movie was going to be. And he's so smart and so well spoken, so articulate and poetic that he just had me hooked. And at some point, I knew to keep my mouth shut. And I just played kind of staring games with him. And before the interview, I was 168 pounds of solid muscle. I'm an old surfer, and I had long blonde curly hair. I looked like William Catt.
Oh, wow.
From the Great American Hero, from Carrie.
Right.
And I didn't have a beard then. I was all tan. And so what I did was I opened up the hood of my car, an old Datsun 2000 sports car, and a little roadster, and I got some grease out on the dipstick, and I greased my hair back, and I have really fine, thin hair, and so it really laid down flat against my skull, and it darkened it a little bit. It didn't look real blonde. And then I took a cigarette butt. My buddy always would leave cigarette butts in my ashtray. And I knew there was an old trick from the theater where you can take cigarette ash and mix it with your saliva, a little spit, and put it, and it makes a real natural shadow on your face for makeup. We used to do it on our temples or around our eyes to sink our eyes in. So I did that under my eyes to take away a little of my tan, healthy look. I put these circles under my eyes. And I buttoned my shirt up all the way to the top button, so it looked kind of strange.
Right.
And then I went into the interview. So I looked a little different. I wasn't real Robert Englund,
Right.
happy-go-lucky actor. And I think between doing that and playing the scaring games with Wes, I think maybe that's what did the job. But, I have a thin face. And, and I've got broad shoulders. And when you put effects makeup on me, it still looks right. My head looks right in ratio to the size of my shoulders. A lot of times, a lot of actors, their heads are kind of big. It looks good on camera, but it doesn't look the right ratio with their shoulders. They can't take that extra size of a effects makeup. It just doesn't look right. The ratio looks wrong. So they were worried about the makeup. That might have been it could have been as simple as, hey, this guy's got a skinny face. He's got a thin head. The makeup won't make his head look too big. It might have been that. Wes said he cast me because I understood. He knew I understood the project, but he might just being nice. He might have just been being nice. The casting director, Annette Benson, also had seen me audition for every single role and with every single actress in Hollywood for a movie called National Lampoon's Class Reunion. And I thought for sure I was going to be in that. And what happens is I auditioned too much. I literally canceled myself out. But all the top actresses in town. Remember, I think Annie Bates wanted me to audition with her, and a bunch of actresses wanted me to audition with them that were up for it as well. And I didn't get in it. And I think that she realized that somehow she'd sort of screwed me out of a part on that by having me up for all the different parts in it instead of just one or two parts. And she was telling Wes how good she thought I was. I think she was in Wes's ear saying, you ought to use this guy, because I think they wanted a big 6'4" stuntman originally for Freddy. And I got home, and this is back in the day of answering machines, and there was a message on my answering machine that I got the part, and
wow,
boom.
Yeah, that's awesome. So are you finding with this lineage and long career that people who grew up with you as Freddy, as their horror icon, are now, in writers, directors, and are actively seeking you out for projects like this new True Terror show that you're on?
Oh, yeah. That's a great thing about young directors and writers in Hollywood is there's people who I really touched their lives when they were young. And the great thing, I was talking to Lance Hendrickson about this from Alien.
Right.
Lance Hendrickson. And Lance was saying, that he loves doing movies with these. He does a lot of movies with young directors too, because they listen to his input. They take his input more.
Right.
If I was just doing big aim blockbusters, they just want to get you in and out because you cost so much.
Right.
And they're on such a big schedule. They actually sometimes have all your movements blocked out for you by a stand-in, or they've already had to make the decision because there's effects going on all around you. You don't get to play as much. But when I'm doing a medium or a low budget horror movie or another kind of movie, and they've asked for me, which is most of my work now, I really get to put my 2 cents worth in. I help choose the costume and and maybe I can fix they let me fix the dialogue or listen to my opinion about how a scene should be changed or something like that. And it's a lot more creative. Part of that's seniority, but part of it is having the kind of cachet of having done close to 80 movies, and hundreds of hours of TV. You get some respect, which is nice.
Yeah. So, like we said at the top, you've been in over 70 films, which is very impressive. And during that span, most of them are horror films. What is it about the horror genre that appeals to you so much?
Well, I loved it as a kid. I was a real fanboy, and this is a different time, a different generation than you guys are familiar with. But the end of it, you might recognize. The end of it would have been when I was a teenager and going to the drive-in movie on dates and stuff. We'd go see the Hammer films with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and Barbara Steele and Herbert Lom. And so that was sort of the end of it for me. But when I was a little kid, I was addicted to I was a huge Twilight Zone fan. I loved, we'd go do sleepovers at your friend's house, you drag your Sears sleeping bag over to your buddy's house, and the parents would go to sleep, and you'd get up and sneak down to the den and put on the Late Show and watch all the horror movies, and then we'd talk about them. We'd go out and mow lawns and take our allowance and go to the Saturday matinees,
Oh, yeah.
Kids, they were all double bills then. And man, I remember seeing Forbidden Planet as a kid. I couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. I think that it's third grade. And I remember seeing 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I was a little kid. That blew my mind. The giant squid. And in Forbidden Planet, I loved the robot, and I loved there was a monster from the Id, which was like an animated outline in lightning of a saber-toothed tiger. But that was, those really rocked my world when I was really young. And then later on, like maybe a couple of years later, when I was like 9 years old or so, then we were finding they were on the Late Show. They'd run the old horror movies from Universal, and we started watching.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going back to this new series for the Travel Channel, I know you can't spoil too much about the episodes that haven't aired yet, but without giving any of that away, do you have a favorite topic or story you've covered so far?
Well, I'm trying to. They started to group them kind of thematically. We had one that was all critters. Last week, it was Black Panthers in the Bayou, and it was cowboys and flying lizards and oh my God! And then we had a Sasquatch one. So they realized because there's 18 actual shows.
Right.
That's 3 per episode, and they kind of realized some of them go together. So I'm kind of uncertain about what's coming up, but in the ones that, excuse me, in the ones we've seen already, I really love the one about the smallpox epidemic in New Orleans.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, a little
bit. I really like that one. It's got a real primal fear attached to it, which is the fear of being buried alive, of suffocation. It goes along with our primal fears of falling and flying and drowning. And everybody, it's universal. Everybody in humanity has that nightmare, and it manifests itself a lot of ways in your dreams. But this is absolutely one of the segments that's true.
Right.
This isn't something we've outgrown, or something that deals with superstitions that we had 100 years ago, or religious beliefs, or much in science has disproved it subsequently. It's not that at all. This is actually a fact that they were burying people alive.
Right.
And part of it was because medical science wasn't as sophisticated, and they didn't know it when people were in comas. The other thing actually was there was actual corruption between coroners and between the guys that drove the bodies to the cemeteries, and the coffin builders and the grave diggers. These guys were all getting paid by the head per capita, on every body they could put underground.
Wow.
And And so there was a lot of that, and it happened before. It happened at even earlier times in Europe, in the plague there. And it just makes you, it's just that kind of window, that kind of look into what we were like back then, and what the kind of things we did, and what we believed, and what could happen in that situation. And that episode, the makeup's real good. It's really a good show. And then I think there's one on tonight that I love, which is again, it's this guy that his true love. Here's the spoiler alert: his true love dies, and he preserves her. And it's like Tony Perkins and his mother,
Right.
Psycho.
Oh, wow.
But it's true. And I talked to a guy in another podcast earlier today, you guys, and he was telling me that he'd seen some newspaper articles about that episode that he'd found, and he'd found some stuff online, and they actually talked about the stuff this guy invented to keep her preserved, like sticking apple cores and apple rinds and orange rinds inside her to take away the smell and to make her cheeks and keep her cheeks in shape and everything. Really gross stuff. But I mean, that episode is really freaky. I was a little concerned because all our shows are period. They're all 19th century, early 20th century, and it's hard enough to do reenactments, and they do that kind of docudrama style anyway. And it's a tricky blend of docudrama and reenactment, and plus we're dealing with the period thing. But they found it such great locations. They're all out there. I think they're all Richmond, Virginia, south of Richmond, Virginia, and then kind of Maryland. And they found that whole kind of George Washington slept here part of the country, where all the barns are 300 years old, and they've got the covered bridges, and even the fields. I mean, they've got some great exterior stuff where even the fields have those old 200-year-old split rail fences around them, and the roads are still dirt roads. So they found a real good area. We can't really afford to go to the actual place of every single show. So sometimes, there's an old saying in Hollywood: a rock is a rock is a rock, a tree is a tree is a tree.
That's right.
Shoot in Hollywood. Well, a barn is a barn is a barn, and when you find yourself a half a dozen great 200-year-old barns, you can use them. You can make them into a lot of things. And our guys on my crew there have been scouting around there, found some really great stuff. I'm hoping if we get picked up for next season, that, like Rod Serling on the old Twilight Zones, in the second or third season, you'd actually see him at the end of an episode. The camera would move away from like a merry-go-round carousel horse, or it would pull away from a pair of crushed old glasses, and then you'd see his feet, and the camera would move up, and Rod Serling would be there on the set of that episode, and he'd kind of wind it up for you, kind of seal it up for you really nice, and give you a tag. And I'm hoping maybe that when they get some really great location, I'm imagining like me walking out of the shadows of an old covered bridge somewhere that was built in the 1800s.
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe you get when you're on screen, is that old Twilight Zone.
Yeah, then you get that feeling that just ties me in more, because part of my baggage is I really do like this stuff. I really do like this shit. And the other thing is that, our show is like, in the tradition of, and we love, everybody that loves this old show called, it was with Robert Stack, Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries, yep.
Yeah. So that's sort of our template. And, And I look at that. That's one of the earliest reality shows, and I look at shows like that, and they're kind of like comfort food. Like like you guys probably have too. I've been binging a lot lately.
Absolutely.
We're all stuck at home, and I've been catching up on stuff. And I just watched that Stephen King one on Showtime, The Outsider, and I'm watching Ozark now, but. Sometimes I need a break because I'm juggling all these characters and all these plots in my head, and I'm 3 hours or 4 hours in, and I just need a break. I just need to hit the pause button and make a sandwich. And sometimes I'll just watch something that I call comfort food TV.
Absolutely.
And I have, like, for me, it might be Dateline. It might be a Deadliest Catch. You never know what it is. I even like that crazy show Chopped. I just can't believe they can make a no match. You know, what are you going to do with those maraschino cherries? But I like those shows. But I think our show is one of those great formula TV experiments. It's like comfort food television. You know, we've got a formula, we've got our segments. You know, I reiterate, I recap for you a bit to keep you up to speed. You know, I love that on good cable and good streaming now. I love that when they go previously on
Yes.
Homeland, and they bring you up to date. I sometimes need that. You know,
Right.
the plots are complicated these days, and I love that kind of formula thing. But with us, it's just something where you can run down and make a sandwich after the first segment. You know, there's room for a commercial, there's room to run down, but you've got that format. And I also like about our show, because I was talking to a guy today that did it already with one of our episodes, but he found an episode that he really liked, and he really wants to go to the town where this particular event happened. And he got online and kept Googling and Googling and Googling. And he went down a rabbit hole and found some really bizarre stuff about one of our shows. So he's already got a road trip planned to go there, because he's heard that there is some really interesting wildlife in that area.
Lastly, you are one of the icons of the horror genre. True Terror deals with different true stories of horrifying experiences. Have any of these scared you? And as an icon of this genre, does Robert Englund himself have anything that legitimately scares him?
Well, I told you the two that creep me out the most,
Right.
and I think one of them's just because it's downright creepy. That's the one that's on
That's
tonight.
very creepy. Yes.
Yeah, but the one but the Buried Alive one did scare me, because I tapped into that primal fear.
Right.
Robert Englund, when I was a kid, I went to the Saturday matinee to see a movie. Kids, I think it was Old Yeller or something like that, and I somehow got there right when they changed over to the grown-up movie for the evening. They called it the adult movie, but it didn't mean adult like we use adult today. It was just like whatever whatever the movie was at night. Well, it started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sitting there. I've got my my good and plenty licorice candy and a big Coca-Cola, and I'm sitting there, and this movie came on, and it was a war movie. Well, I love kids of my generation in the 1950s, because we were closer to World War II, and a lot of our dads had been in World War II.
Right.
We liked war movies, and there were a lot of war movies made then. Some of them were really good movies, and I'm sitting there, and it's a war movie, and I think I can take it, right? It's called The Naked and the Dead. It's based on a best-selling book by Norman Mailer, the famous American writer. And in the middle of this movie, you're in the South Pacific on a tropical island, and this GI gets bit by this lime green snake, and he dies this horrible death in CinemaScope and Technicolor, and pus comes out of his nose and his ear, and his eyes and his mouth and his butt, and he's writhing around, and it freaked me out. Little Robbie Englund. I'm probably 9 years old. It freaked me out, and so I was scared about snakes that summer, like damaged. I was damaged. I was looking under the bed every night. I was looking between the blankets. I was looking in my closet, in my chest of drawers. Got a little better, but I still, man, every time I was out hiking, I'm an old surfer. Every time I was going to the beach and I was walking down rocks where snakes sun themselves and stuff, I was always nervous about snakes. And then, like every good horror movie actor, sooner or later,
Oh yeah.
do your killer bee movie or your giant alligator movie, or giant snake movie. Well, yours truly, I've done all three of those.
Nice.
When I did my giant snake movie, my character was the snake expert, the herpetologist.
Oh
They
jeez.
gave me a little baby albino python, female, and they put it in a tube sock, and they put it under my arm, where it's nice and hot and moist in my armpit, and put a little shoelace up here underneath my costume so you couldn't see it. And I would keep her there, and then I'd take her out just before they said action, and I'd coil her on my hand, and I'd bring my hand up near my face when I was doing my dialogue or something, and I'd pet my little baby girl, and I knew it looked cool. I knew it was a cool prop to have, my little baby python. And that's how I got over my fear of snakes. 8 weeks, getting used to that little baby snake. Of course, she's growing all that time.
Right.
By the end, she could really squeeze my fist open if she wanted, and I could feel the power. But it was just, that's what it's the irony cracks me up, that a movie made me scared of snakes, and a movie cured me of snakes, and here I'm supposed to be scary.
Robert, we're about to wrap up, but I just wanted to read a quote that you had from, I've listened to several interviews you've done, read some articles just to get prepared for this, and this kind of stuck out to me. You said, "I've met thousands of fans whose memory of Nightmare on Elm Street is not as a horrible, violent film. They have great fond memories of watching with their moms and dads and brothers and sisters after the whole family went out to a video store and chose a movie to watch on the weekend. They stayed home and sent out for pizza. They have these memories of a family experience." And I just wanted to thank you because in 2003, when I was a 12-year-old boy, my mom, she was a, big Nightmare on Elm Street fan. And she took me as a 12-year-old boy, my little brother, and a classmate to go see Freddy vs. Jason. And I'm a self-admitted mama's boy, and every time I'm at home, I get to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street with her, around Halloween time mostly. And she actually just texted me a minute ago and said good luck. And she said she was watching Criminal Minds, the episode you were on. I just want to thank you because, like I said, I'm a mama's boy. And I'm going to take that memory of going to see Freddy vs. Jason in the theaters with her because that was my first horror I ever seen in the theater. I get to take to the grave with me. I binge watched Nightmare on Elm Street together with her, and we still watch it to this day. So I just want to thank you for giving me and my mom something in common. And I honestly really appreciate everything you've done for the horror genre. And I'm really happy you got this show. Is there anything you'd like to say to that, Mr. Englund?
Well, I just like to say, I probably owe half my career, especially my Freddy and my post Freddy career, to really cool moms, like yours, to really cool dads, to really cool stepdads, to really cool Sunday dads that were divorced and got the kids on the weekend. And let the kids go to the mom and pop video store or to Blockbuster and choose anything they wanted because mom was trying to make them only watch Disney goody movies. I mean, how long can you live on My Little Pony? And so I have this experience now, having done 10 years or so of Comic-Cons and 20 years or so of film festivals. I have this experience of getting people telling me about these great moments of their dad putting on a fake glove and going out and scratching the window outside the room, trying to scare the kids, or dad dressing up like Freddy, or an older brother trying to terrorize you, or a babysitter letting you watch it, and you didn't know what you were getting into, or a big sister who tried to scare you and made you watch it, or watching your mom and dad watch it and watching them jump. Because you've already tested it and seen it once and you know what the scares are. And then you watch your mom and dad jump and having that fun of watching your mom or dad or your stepdad get scared. And back in the day, there was controversy about these movies. They were considered too violent and too dark and too scary. And I was always getting attacked on talk shows and stuff and on radio shows. So I didn't add it up that half the people that saw these movies didn't necessarily see them in the movie theaters. They saw them at home.
Right.
And if you're at home, you're with your family. You're around your loved ones or your sisters and brothers and stuff. So it becomes this memory of a shared experience with the family, as well as it becomes your introduction to the Nightmare on Elm Street world. And that's just this weird thing to me. But that on some strange, crazy level, the Nightmare on Elm Street films were actually a family experience for a lot of Americans.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And honestly, the last 30 minutes or so of Freddy vs. Jason is probably some of my favorite, cinema in all of horror. I just really enjoy watching two of my favorite icons that I love, on screen duking it out.
Well, that Jason's a puck face,
Yeah. See, thank you, Robert. Thank you. Tried to tell him.
I just want to give your show one more shout out. Again, you can find Robert currently on Travel Channel's newest series, True Terror with Robert Englund, and it airs every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. on the Travel Channel. Robert, we really want to thank you for being on the show. This has been
absolutely.
This has been like a holy grail moment for all of us. We all love your movies, and we all love and respect your character, and we wish you the best of luck.
You know, podcasts are only as good as the questions, and you know, I answer the same questions a lot, and it's really nice when I get something fresh and I can digress, because then the people listening are getting something fresh. So thank you for the good questions.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And just want to remind everybody to don't go out there.
Hidden away in news reports from America's past lurk tales so frightening that they must be true.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
What the hell is that?
I'm frightened, Emily.
You people are insane! You don't have to do this! I'm Robert Englund. Join me on a journey into the dark shadows of our nation's history.
Axeman murderer takes his 8th victim.
To uncover stories as terrifying as they are real.
I've never heard or seen anything like it.
It's unnatural.
I heard something from inside the coffin. Someone is alive in there.